February is a month where we're bombarded by ads for Valentine's Day. But what if you're in the midst of a separation, divorce, or a time in your life when you're hurting? My guest today is Josie Falcon, host of From Devastated to Divorced, your guide through the unwanted end of a marriage. You're going to hear from Josie about the power of vulnerability, loving yourself, and how you can share personal experience in a way that creates connection with listeners. Since we recorded our interview together, Josie has changed the name of her show from Heavy Pages, so you will hear reference to that old name. I'm Alison Fraser, host of Women Who Podcast, the show for side hustling women who are ambitious but time limited. Each week, I bring you real life stories and actionable tips to help you create and grow your own podcast. Welcome to our Women Who Podcast, Josie Falcon from Heavy Pages, a journey from separation to divorce.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Josie, we're in the month of February where we're surrounded by reminders of Valentines, there's red roses, advertisements for all kinds of things. What advice would you give to a woman who is in the time of life where they are going through separation and they're surrounded by all these reminders of love?
Well, absolutely. I know it's difficult all the time, but when you're bombarded with all of these hearts and love and lovey-dovey stuff, it makes it even worse. So the first thing I would say is give yourself a little grace. It's okay to be a little annoyed at it all. It's okay. It's normal. You can have those feels, so allow it. And then I would say that specifically for like Valentine's Day, maybe come up with a date for yourself. Make plans for something that you want to do, maybe something that you've never been able to try, maybe something your partner wasn't interested in, so you didn't try to do it, and plan that. And that way, whenever you know that the 14th is coming around, you have something positive to look forward to. It doesn't have to be about dating somebody or going on a date or, oh, I'm alone. No, you have now a really exciting thing to put your mind towards, and that will kind of help take that edge off, I think.
And about showing yourself some love as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, ultimately at the end of the day, if you love yourself and you are happy with yourself and you're happy, alone time, you can find peace and fun just being by yourself. Having a partner is a bonus. It's not something that you absolutely need to have a happy and fulfilling life.
How did you come about having a podcast in this topic?
Well, I obviously dealt with my own unwanted separation. I was a wife and mother, and my now ex-husband sprung on me that he, wasn't happy in the relationship and wanted a divorce and a separation mainly first. And so it was extremely hard for me. I was not prepared for it. I was shocked. I struggled. And one of the things that I've always loved to do is journal. And so from the date that basically I moved out of our family home, I started journaling my feelings so that I wouldn't send him emails or call him and be just that kind of person. I just put all my feelings into my journal. And then years later, I would always revisit it a little bit. And I always thought it might make a cool book, but I hate to write. And then a movie would be cool, but really, who's going to play me? So when I discovered podcasting, I'm like, oh my God, I love to talk. I can talk your ear off. And so I thought this would be a great place to share my journey. And so the podcast originated as me reading my journal entries, being really raw with everybody out there, telling them what I wrote, reading what I wrote, and then talking about what I've learned along the way and the stuff that I was complaining about that was silly and the stupid mistakes I made that hopefully they don't make. So that's how the podcast started.
Wow. So you've been really open with listeners right from the start.
Yeah. Honestly, sometimes I thought about quitting because of the stuff that I was putting out there. And I'm like, do people really want to hear this? I would cry in some episodes and I'm like, what is happening here? But people were getting value and relating. And so I'm like, push through. And, I'm really glad that I did in those moments.
What feedback have you had from your listeners who have heard you be so vulnerable with them
knowing, that this is your separation story?
Right. Well, many of them are glad to hear that they weren't alone in certain situations that they were struggling with, obviously feeling like you're never going to be loved again or feeling like you're unworthy and struggling with self-worth. And then being able, I know that they hear it all the time from us who have made it to the other side. There's like, we promise you will get to the other side and you will, look back on this and be like, it was a journey, it was a roller coaster, but I survived it. And I actually, you know, have grown into even a better person because of it. So it's hard for them to see that because they always see you on the other side of it. But when they hear my story and they're like, oh my God, you did that. Oh my gosh, you felt like that. Oh my God, you were struggling like that. It helps them to realize, yeah, you know where I'm coming from. You know where I am now. So that's good. I love it when I hear that. I give them the hope.
Yeah, because people always seem to compare their chapter 1 to your chapter 30, don't they?
That's
But
right.
their chapter 30 it could be just like yours.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's funny because I actually have a program that it's called the 5 chapters for surviving a separation. And it kind of gives you that roadmap of this is where you might be and this is where you want to get to. So you can kind of see along the way what you're feeling, what you're struggling with, and you're going to know how close you're getting to the end. So it's not a direct line, but there is a line to get there. So it helps them. And yes, I am over here, but you can get over here because I was over there. It's possible.
What would you say to the Josie of those 5 chapters ago, knowing what you know now?
Gosh. Yeah. I honestly would have told her, one of the things I would have told her was stop talking to your ex so much. Stop depending on him. Let go of that lifeline. He's your past. He's not going to be your future. And it's okay to put him in his place and that you can do this. You have value and you are going to be able to survive and make this happen on your own. And not only survive, but you're going to do amazing. And I wouldn't have believed it, even if I tell it. If I would have told it to myself, I wouldn't have believed it. But I'm not even going to say that that's true because I have always been the type of person that, when I set my mind to something, I will try and do it. But when you have that sort of pain, it's kind of hard to just set your mind to something else. You don't even have the opportunity to just imagine the future because you're so stuck in where you are.
Can you remember your first Valentine's Day after separation?
I do. And this is why I say that I should have left it behind because honestly, my Valentine after separation, I went out with my ex-husband to watch a movie. We were not officially exes yet. We were separated still though. And we went to see a movie. And I think the movie was The Phantom of the Opera with Gerard Butler, which I loved that movie. But I also remember that, the Phantom was so in love with Christine and he was killing for her and doing all this stuff. And I remember looking over at my ex-husband and being like, dude, you couldn't love me like this. Like, do you see the love there? And it was like, what am I even doing here? So yeah, maybe this is why I say date yourself. So yeah.
And what have you done since?
Well, since I have, I focus more on, also I have a son, so I would do more things with my son and be like, let's us do something. I would do with also if he wasn't interested or if he was with his dad, I would make plans with my friends, the girls, because there was a few of us that were in between relationships at the time and we would find something fun to do. And honestly, I try not to even put that much. I'll get myself the chocolate candies and enjoy them at home watching a movie and perfectly enjoy that. I try not to make this any more of a big deal than it really needs to be. It's just a day in February,
Mm. I think so much is put on this one day these days, and maybe it's just a commercialism thing.
Right. I'm sure it is. I mean, they want to make their money, so they're going to make it as big a deal as possible. And a lot of us fall into it. We can't help it, but that's what we can remind ourselves. At the end of the day, it means nothing. It's just, a postcard holiday, like they say, and you can just ignore it. If, it might be hard, but you can just ignore it.
What was the Josie of, before your podcast have said, if you had said, hey, Josie, you're going to do a podcast all about what you're going through right now, and you're going to have people listening and you're going to be helping others going through separation?
Well, I would have said that sounds really cool, but do you really want to expose yourself like that? Do you really want to put all of that out there? And I think I would have encouraged it. I think I would have encouraged it. I wish that I would have discovered podcasting sooner, honestly. It just happened, of course, like many people, 2020, you have nothing else going on. You're like stuck in your house. And you're like, what can I do? But I think honestly, it happened probably right at the right time where I really have a lot of good perspective and can, give fair, helpful advice. But I think I would have loved it. I think I would have encouraged myself to go for it for sure.
Were you a podcast listener before you decided to do your podcast?
Do you know that I was, but only just a little bit before, because I have always been a talk radio. Like, I love that kind of concept. Like, when I'm in the car, I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to the talk radio stations. But I hadn't had an opportunity to really just listen to podcasts or find podcasts, or I knew that they existed, but I wasn't really aware of them. And then more when 2020 started and I was going out for walks and I wanted to listen to something, I found a lot of really great ones. And I'm like, oh, I like this. This is great. This is better than talk radio because I could pick the topic. I don't have to just listen to what they're playing. And so, oh, I loved it. And then after I started listening, and now I listen like crazy. I mean, that's what I do with my day in my car. If I'm cleaning, I'm always listening to something.
Can you share a couple of your favorites with us?
Sure. So I listen to some political ones, and one of my favorite is Pod Save America. I like listening to that one. The guys are funny, and so they're kind of entertaining. So also for business, I listen to a few, but my favorite one is The Global Phenomenon by Ina Coveney. She gives some really great advice, and she has a lot of great guests on there. So I like to listen to her. Those are kind of, the range of stuff and of course, I love listening to crime and stuff like that. So I definitely listen to my Dateline every time it comes out. That's like my guilty pleasure one, but those are some of the top ones that I listen to. Don't miss them.
Well, I'll put links to the show in the show notes to those, but I think we all do need to have a guilty pleasure podcast as well as ones that are for, learning whatever kind of learning we're in at the moment, whether it is a business one or relationships.
Right. Oh, yes. Don't forget mine. I'm right. I should mention mine, but of course, Yes. So exactly. It's great because even you learn a little something and you entertain yourself and you feel community in some of them. So, there's a podcast for everything. So that's why it's so great.
What have you learned about yourself from podcasting?
Well, I used to feel like I was kind of an introvert, surprisingly. Like, I would not want to raise my hand in class or things like that because I didn't want to be singled out, even though if I don't really feel like you're looking at me, like social media, because I'm looking at a camera, I can do that all day long. But having to talk to people sometimes would it would be intimidating. But I have learned that I've gotten a lot better at that, specifically because I would try and join in other people's podcast episodes, and I had to be more forward facing. So I learned that I'm not as introverted or shy in that aspect as I thought I was.
Come out of your shell.
Yes. Yeah, kind of.
And for anyone who may be thinking about starting a podcast, what tip would you give them or something that you've learned that you'd like to share?
Well, I would say don't let it stop you. Don't let fear stop you. And it's not as expensive. It doesn't have to be like, I can't do it because it's crazy expensive. I got a decent mic. I use my computer. I edit with the program that came on the computer, and I haven't had to spend tons of money. I know it sounds like it has to be a lot of money, and some people make it seem like that, but I wouldn't let that stop you. Don't worry about having to have like the perfect studio sound system and all that stuff to get started. And if you had something you want to talk about, do it. Give it a try. What can it hurt? It might be for you. It might not be for you, but you won't know if you don't try.
Those are great words and words that I use quite a lot myself. But you don't have to have the flash equipment or make it sound highly produced. If you've got something worth saying, then that's your permission to just start a podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that people have something worth saying. They just don't think someone wants to hear it, but give it a try.
You will never know otherwise, will you?
That's right.
And it could be, 3-4 seasons down the track and you're still doing it and you're loving it and you've got people who are hanging on every word.
Yes, absolutely. That's great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Josie. Is there anything else that we ought to know about yourself?
Well, I will say that after I started the podcast, I am on season 4, and I've got such great reviews and results and women speaking to me that I did transition into coaching women dealing with an unwanted separation specifically, right? That's the women that I help, because that's the what I've learned, my journey and things like that. So, but you can find me all over Instagram, basically under the Heavy Pages. You can find me all over social media, just being silly. And you can link to my website, which is josiefalcon.com. And there you can find out, any ways that you'd like to work with me if you find that something you'd like to find out more about.
We'll have all those links in the show notes too. So for anyone who may be out walking and doesn't have, pen and paper or just...
Exactly. That's how we'd love to listen, right? So
yeah,
that's probably how you catch them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Josie.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on today. Thanks so much.
Thanks again, Josie, for sharing about your experience and giving ideas on how women going through separation and divorce can love themselves this Valentine's. You heard Josie mention how she gave herself permission to try podcasting to see if she liked it. And that's the thing, you can give it a go and stop after a couple of episodes, or you may find you like it and want to keep going, but you won't know unless you try. As I mentioned earlier, Josie's podcast name has changed, and you can get links to that and to her website in the show notes. I'm also opening up my show notes to other podcasters, so if you want your name and podcast mentioned, you can get featured by joining my Patreon for just $5 a month. Thanks for listening. That's it from me this week, and I'll speak to you again soon. You've been listening to Women Who Podcast, the podcast for women with something to say.